I'd like to call to order the June 6, 2024 meeting of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission business meeting. At this time, this meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. A recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. As a courtesy to others, please take a minute and check on your cell phones and turn them off during the meeting. And at this time, I'd like to call on and recognize Commissioner Joe Budd for our pledge of allegiance.
Mr. Chairman, as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance, let us remember that today is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. As we say the pledge, let's think about the honor and sacrifice that went before us. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, I'd like to recognize and call on Commissioner Thomas Bondle to return our invocation.
Let us pray. Father God, I thank you for appointing and entrusting us to be stewards of all your creations. I thank you for the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the wildlife, the lands and waters of the state of North Carolina. I thank you for the men and women who have chosen as their profession to be stewards of these valuable resources. I thank you for all the volunteers that have made that same commitment. I pray now for your guidance, direction, and wisdom as we carry out our role as stewards. May we make decisions that are pleasing to you and in the best interest of these valuable resources. I pray for the proper balance between the interests of the citizens of the state and the well-being and care of the resources you have entrusted to us. I pray the safety of everyone that's committed to this service. I pray that you would bless our time together today as we carry out your commands. And Father, I also pray for Cam's wife, Renee. I pray that she would experience your presence and be comforted by it. I pray that you would keep her safe. I pray that she would feel the peace that passes all understanding.
Yes.
And I pray for her complete healing. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner Budd and Commissioner Bondle. This time, I recognize Margo Mingle to do a roll call to Commissioner's present.
Good morning, and roll call for our June 6, 2024 meeting. Bonnie Crump,
Present.
Mark Craig,
Here.
David Hoyle,
Here.
John Coley, Wes Seegers,
Here.
Tommy Fumble,
Here.
Tom Berry,
Here.
Brad Stanback,
Here.
Jim Ruffin,
Here.
Ray Clifton,
Here.
Kelly Davis, here, Steve Wyndham, Landon Zimmer, John Stone,
Here.
Hayden Rogers, John Alexander, Tom Hayslip,
Here.
J.C. Cole,
Here.
Mike Alford,
Here.
Joe Budd,
Here.
Reed Smith.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Margo. North Carolina General Statute 138A-15 mandates that the commission chair shall remind all commissioners of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict under this chapter, and that the chair also inquires whether there is any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the commission at this time. It is the duty of each commissioner who is aware of such personal conflict of interest or of an appearance of a conflict to notify the chair of the same. At this time, I ask, are there any recusals to be noted before we continue the meeting? Hearing none, we'll move forward. And at this time, I recognize Margo Mingle once again to review the State Ethics Commission review of the 2024 Statement of Economic Interest for prospective Commissioner Reed Smith pursuant to General Statute 138-15C. Margo.
We received the evaluation of statement of economic interest filed by Mr. Reed Smith. They did not find an actual conflict of interest, but found a potential for a conflict of interest. The potential conflict identified does not prohibit service of this entity. Mr. Smith is the founder and CEO of the real estate development agricultural company River Wild. In addition, he owns financial interests in multiple real estate related LLCs that could hold properties subject to the commission's regulations. Should any of these properties become subject to regulations adopted by the Wildlife Resources Commission or should the commission desire to purchase or acquire any of these properties, Mr. Smith would have the potential for a conflict of interest. Accordingly, Mr. Smith should exercise appropriate caution in the performance of his public duties should issues involving any entity in which he or his spouse own a financial interest come before the commission for official action. Mr. Chairman, that's the relative statement of his economic.
Thank you, Margot. At this time, I would like to recognize the Honorable John R. Bell, a member of the North Carolina House of Representatives, to administer the oath of office to the House Speaker appointee Ruth M. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Reed, we'll get your family up here, and Mr. Chairman, if y'all could swing by the North Carolina House of Representatives, I noticed y'all promptly started on time, and everybody was ready to go. We need some guidance on our side, so you can come, we'd appreciate that, it's an honor to be here with you today, and before we swear Mr. Smith, I just want to say thank you for what you do. Thank you for volunteering for our state and the good work you do. The Wildlife Resources Commission is an outstanding organization, and it's definitely one that the results speak for themselves, so thank you for what you do. And on behalf of Speaker Moore and the House of Representatives, I get the awesome opportunity to swear you in. And so what I ask you to do is please put your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand, and I will say aye, then you state your name. And at the end of the oath, just say, so help me God. So we'll get started. I,
Reed Smith,
do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States. I
Reed Smith,
do solemnly and sincerely swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina and to the constitutional powers and authorities which are or may be established for the government therefore, and that I will endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution of said state, not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States. I
Reed Smith,
do solemnly swear that I will and truly execute the duties of my office as a member of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission according to the best of my skill and ability, according to the law. So help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations, sir.
Officially welcome to the board.
Thank you.
And we'll take a quick break. If you'll step out, Reed, we'll get a couple pictures. Gavel back into session, and at this time, we'll move forward with the consideration and approval of the minutes of the April 18th, 2024 meeting minutes. They've been previously distributed in your packet. It's Exhibit A. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of April 18th? Make a motion to approve the minutes. Motion, got a second? Second. Motion second, for Seegers. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption, approval of minutes of April 18th, 2024 meeting as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. And at this time, I would like to recognize Jason Cottle, our Chief Financial Officer, to present our financial status report.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll begin to present Exhibit B for you. This will be a brief summary of expenditures and revenues in both our general fund and capital improvement funds as of April 30, 2024. Excuse me. In our general fund, we saw total revenues of $145,129,693.25. Total expenditures in the same of $139,771,354.80. Leaving an overall fund balance as of April 30 of $26,572,719.77. In our capital improvement fund, total revenues for the same period were $9,171,407.38. Total expenditures during the same were $8,631,885.89, leaving us an overall fund balance of $3,902,077.32. Any questions before I move on? Looking at our endowment fund balance, and this should be a repeat of what was presented yesterday at the Finance Committee meeting. Endowment fund balance overall as of April 30, 2024 was $183,744,551.45. That's represented by an allocation of 83.41% equities, or $153,263,237.68, or 16.59% in our short-term investment fund for a balance of $30,481,313.77. Our total expendable income earned to date in the endowment fund is $61,457,348.15. And as I explained yesterday, a little over $35 million of that currently obligated for agency priorities and legislative directives, leaving us an unencumbered balance in expendable income of $24,592,129.15. Are there any questions about the data as presented? If not, that concludes the financial presentation.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate that. At this time, we'll move forward to committee reports. I recognize Wes Segers, Chair of the Rules Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Rules Committee met in an out-of-cycle meeting on May 14th to review the 2025 and 2026 annual cycle rule proposals and the plan for readoption of several periodic review rules. First, Chiefs presented inland fishing, land, water access, and wildlife management proposals for the 25-26 seasons. A new proposal based on the discussions from the April Commission meeting to shift the turkey season 1 week later than the current season framework was presented and discussed. All proposals will be approved and moved forward in the rulemaking in June. Next, the readoption of 410G and 1010J rules were presented. These rules were presented for notice in the July, will be noticed for July, so they can be readopted before the December 2024 deadline. Finally, the definition of youth was discussed and the merits of both variations and consistency between the ages of youth for hunting different species that affect deer, turkey, migratory birds, game birds, and trout rules. Additional discussions will be had in June for a meeting, at the meeting for a decision on this matter. That concludes our report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any comments or questions regarding the Rules Committee report? Hearing none, we'll move forward to Land Acquisition Property Committee. Recognize Chair Tom Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Land Acquisition and Property Committee met at 9 yesterday on June 5th. The Land Acquisition Property Committee began by reviewing newly formatted Phase 1 Land Investigation Form. Committee provided feedback on new Phase 1 form, requested that staff add property tax value and asking price to the form. Committee also recommended that staff continue using existing overlay and detail maps. The recommendation was made to provide a parcel data on the detail map in order to show parcel size of surrounding properties. The motion was made to approve the newly formatted Phase 1 with the contingency of staff incorporated recommended changes from the committee. The motion passed. Committee also reviewed and approved 3 Phase 1 land acquisition proposals and 1 Phase 2 land acquisition proposal. 2 other property matters were presented. The committee approved the Dominion easement request in Castle County, but the committee denied to vote the TED renewables easement request in Bertie County. Ben Solomon will give a slide demonstration of all the above in his presentation. The meeting adjourned at 10:07. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions or comments regarding the Land Acquisition Property Committee report? Hearing none, I'll move forward now to recognize Chairperson Kelly Davis of the Habitat Non-Game Endangered Species for your committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Habitat Non-Game Endangered Species Committee met on June 5th, 2024 at 10:05 a.m. Dr. Sarah Schweitzer provided presentation on the Sea Turtles Conservation Plan and the nomination packet for the expiring terms of Non-Game Wildlife Advisory Committee membership. The committee endorsed both, and they will be voted on later in this meeting. The committee then received a presentation by Rachel Hoke on a reintroduction proposal for Carolina Heel Splitter in Stevens Creek. The reintroduction will be done under the North Carolina Programmatic Safe Harbor Agreement, and the proposal was approved unanimously. Next, Cindy Simpson provided updates on the major revision of the Wildlife Action Plan, projected timeline, a new tool to identify opportunity areas, opportunities for participation, and where to find more information. The final revision is due to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service no later than September 30th, 2025. Next, Shannon Deaton provided information on the 2024 Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award and explained the criteria and procedure used to select a recipient. Shannon also provided information on an America the Beautiful Challenge grant the agency was recently awarded to benefit Southeast species of greatest conservation need in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. Two guests, Dr. Greg Cope, a distinguished professor at NC State University, and Chris Eads, faculty at North Carolina State University, joined the committee meeting to provide information on the newly constructed Yates Mill Aquatic Conservation Center located in Wake County. Chris Eads, Assistant Director of the center, presented information on the mission of the new center that uses cutting-edge techniques to rear imperiled aquatic species, supports staff and student research, and provides public outreach and education opportunities. A future field trip for commissioners will be planned. Finally, I'd like to report the committee voted on the recipient for the 2024 Quay Award, and at this time, I'd like to make a motion recommending Dr. Wilson Laney to receive the Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award for 2024.
You have a motion on the floor from the committee chair to recommend Wilson Laney to receive the Quay Award for 2024. Is there a second?
Second.
I got a second from Jim Ruffin. Are there any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to name Wilson Laney the winner of the recipient of the 2024 Thomas Quay Award, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There being no further business, the committee was adjourned at 11:03 a.m. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions related to the Habitat Non-Game Endangered Species Committee report? Hearing none, I'll recognize Chairman David Hoyle of the Big Game Committee.
Big Game Committee met on Wednesday, June the 5th at 11. The meeting began with a presentation by one of our social scientists, Catherine Jewell. She shared really interesting findings and information from our wildlife feeding and baiting in North Carolina survey. The survey explored what percentage of deer and bear hunters are baiting or feeding and how much they are putting out, along with a bunch of other interesting facts about baiting and feeding by deer and bear hunters. We look forward to seeing the full summary of the survey in the near future. Next, Colleen Opelbutel, Game and Fur Program Supervisor, gave us a brief update on the Coastal Bear Population Research Project, which is in its final field season. And then she discussed the different data that would be used to inform the new bear plan and the general timeline for when it would be complete. The target date is December 2026. Having no further business, the meeting was adjourned.
Questions or comments reference to Big Game Committee report? Hearing none, at this time I'll recognize Vice Chair Brad Standback of the Finance Audit and Compliance Committee to provide that report.
Finance Audit and Compliance Committee met June 5th, 2024. CFO Jason Cottle presented a comparison of current and prior fiscal year-to-date expenditures and revenues in both the general fund and capital improvement fund categories, offering comments for any categories either increasing or decreasing in excess of $1 million. An update was also provided on the current value and asset allocation of the agency's endowment fund, including the amount of expendable income currently available for use and the amount of expendable income presently obligated for agency priorities. Deputy Director Kyle Briggs introduced to the board WRC's new internal auditor, Elizabeth Davis. Internal Auditor Elizabeth Davis provided an overview of internal audit and compliance requirements for the internal audit function. The 2024 updated WRC internal audit charter was presented to the committee. Key updates to the new charter were discussed, and the committee voted to approve the new charter. Internal Auditor Elizabeth Davis presented the self-assessment maturity model and discussed where the audit function was assessed within the model based on work completed in fiscal year 2024. Internal Auditor Elizabeth Davis detailed there were 2 engagements in process, which included the Enhancing Accountability in Government Through Leadership and Education project and the annual internal risk audit risk assessment. That the meeting was concluded, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Finance Audit Compliance Committee report is presented. Here none, I present report from the Committee of the Whole. Met yesterday afternoon at 2:05. The meeting began with Brian Daniels presenting the reciprocal license fees. Next, we move to rulemaking, and Melva Bonner presented temporary and permanent rulemaking for Needmore Game Lands and temporary rulemaking, Buffalo Cove, South Mountains, and Kings Creek Game Lands. Darren Barnes, Brad Howard, and Christian Waters presented the annual cycle rule proposal for 25-26. The committee endorsed modifying the turkey season as presented by staff, changing the definition of youth hunt to under 16. Finally, Christian Waters presented temporary rulemaking for striped mullet and white mullet, harvest reporting requirements for flounder. After a very, very lively discussion about these rules, the committee adjourned and comments or questions about that. And any of you all that left early yesterday, I understand you had business to do. You missed probably one of the liveliest discussions we've had in a while on committee day. And we survived it and, we're here today. So with that being said, are there any comments or questions about the committee of the whole report? Here none, we'll move forward in the agenda, and I recognize Brad Howard to introduce our speaker for our agency spotlight, Searching for Same.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For this Wildlife Management Division Spotlight, we tried a slightly different approach. Instead of highlighting a project or a program, we decided to highlight a piece of technology. We had a collective of our staff get together, work and join forces to put this presentation together and to provide information, insight, and yes, sounds like you just heard to this presentation. To present for the division here today is our newest herpetologist, Aubrey Green. She's here to talk about the use of acoustic recording devices. As an Iowa native, Aubrey grew up catching frogs and snakes at a young age. She went to undergraduate school at Iowa State and got her Master's of Science from Florida A&M. And while Aubrey is new to us here at the Commission, she spent the last 7 years working in Florida as one of their herpetologists studying gopher frogs, and spent the rest of her 20-year career working across the Southeast on herps, birds, small mammals, and even aquatic insects. So, with no further ado, welcome Aubrey.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction, Brad, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm excited to share with you how our WRC biologists are searching for sound using cutting-edge technology throughout our North Carolina landscapes, from the mountains to the coast. Autonomous Recording Units, or ARUs, a device with many names, some of which you may have heard before, such as audio detector or sound recorder, or by their brand names, Anabat, Audio Moth, or Song Meter. Of course, my personal favorite is Frog Logger, being a herpetologist. But what exactly is an ARU, and what does it do? Well, to put it really simply, think trail cameras, but for sound. ARUs passively monitor sound, which makes them a really great wildlife management tool for many of our threatened and endangered species, species of greatest conservation need, and game species. These devices come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Thankfully, they've gotten a lot smaller over the years, which makes them a lot easier to take out into the field. But they all record sound, usually to an SD card, and have some kind of microphone, either internal or external. And like trail cameras, they're programmable and can be deployed for extended periods of time in all habitats and conditions, from our high mountain terrain to coastal marshes. Okay, so ARUs record sound, but what kind of data are they really providing us? Well, the data is recorded as sound files, but what they're really giving us is acoustic monitoring data for a site, similar to what a biologist standing in the same spot might be able to detect. And that data can be collected either as They're providing us this data in a way that we are able to capture sound files, but really they're providing data that provide, Nerves are getting better with me today, apparently. They're giving us sound files that provide data for our conservation and management efforts, which really allows us to determine, they're recording a lot longer than any of us really has time to stand there, obviously. So being out there for these long periods of time, we're getting away way more data than we would. Say if I was out there for just a 5-minute survey a month, we're getting data for continuous amounts of time from, sorry, this is like my worst nightmare.
It's good, don't worry about it.
Take your time.
Plus, we can determine how long and when they record. So for instance, for gopher frogs, we record for 5 minutes every hour, beginning at sunset and ending at sunrise. Whereas for songbirds, we'd obviously choose a program that would record for a different period of time, usually during the day, and also maybe longer, for an even longer amount of time. One of the really cool things, though, about ARUs is that they're recording all sounds, from the low-frequency gopher frog calls to ultrasonic Carolina northern flying squirrel calls. Wait a minute, I said ultrasonic, so how come we could hear that? Well, that was actually slowed down 10 times so it could be heard by the human ear. The ARUs are able to record these high-frequency calls that we normally wouldn't be able to detect just by listening. WRC has been using these cutting-edge devices since 2012. And these pictures show you some of the species or species communities that we've used them for over the years. Really, we use ARUs for 2 main reasons. One, to monitor rare species to inform our conservation efforts for that species, or 2, to inform our management and regulations, either by determining if an action should be taken or determining a species response to an action that we've already made. I'll point out a few examples here so you can see that. Okay, so we set frog loggers or ARUs for the state endangered river frogs, hoping to find them for a few years beginning in 2012. Bat community monitoring also started in 2012 in the mountain region and continues throughout the state today. We started using ARUs to monitor state endangered Carolina gopher frogs beginning in 2014. The Turkey Gobbing Project ran from 2016 to 2019 to inform our hunting regulations. And from 2016 to 2019, we ran ARUs to inform our long-term monitoring for ruffed grouse, a species of greatest conservation need in the state. Well, all of these projects produce a lot of data. And back when frog loggers were first used in the 1990s, they were actually homemade devices that usually recorded to cassette, that you actually had to listen to the entire thing to know what was detected. Well, thankfully, technology has come a long way since then. We have a lot of different acoustic software programs available to us that provide us allow us to not just listen to these recordings, but visualize them. These are the visualizations or spectrograms of the species that you just saw on the previous slide. Just give me a couple times to see this. So acoustic software allows us to more efficiently analyze the data that we've collected, either by visually scanning recordings for these call signatures that you see, or by creating classifiers that will actually find those calls for us, speeding up the process even more. And as this, and if you've ever actually used the Merlin app to identify birds in your backyard, that's actually one such classifier that has been developed to identify not just one species, but many species. And as this kind of AI continues to be developed, it's going to only make our analysis more efficient and effective. ARUs are a great tool in our conservation toolbox, but they, like any tool, they have limitations and possible drawbacks. As I mentioned earlier, they do create a lot of data on the level and scale of terabytes for just one project. That much data can be a blessing for our management goals, but a curse for trying to figure out how to back up and store this much data long term. For post-processing, ARUs do require less staff time on the front end to collect the data, but as I hinted at before, analysis can take a bit longer time, in which we do have classifiers for some of our species, like some of our bats, but classifiers are yet to be developed for several of our projects. So visually or manually viewing these spectrograms is still required. over the years, actually, several of our partners, myself included, have tried to actually create a classifier for the gopher frog, as you heard the low frequency call before. But they're pretty ineffective, as that low frequency call sounds like every train, plane, and automobile to a classifier. How many species did you hear? How many can you see on the spectrogram? How about 4? Frog choruses can be overwhelming to the human ear, especially with all of these individuals and species calling all at the same time. But it's no different for ARUs and acoustic software. They can, with a really big chorus, bigger than what you just heard, the entire spectrogram is this bright green yellow color, and it's completely deafening to try to listen to. So it's really not surprising that this limits our ability to use classifiers for frogs, as they can't identify individual calls in this cacophony of sound. And I do have to admit, like any other tool, ARUs are known to malfunction from time to time. Okay, sometimes a lot. Sometimes they just stop recording for no reason, which has happened to me a lot of times over the years in the field. And it's not limited to brand or device. It's just something that a drawback we have to accept to use these very useful tools in the field. And probably the biggest limitation of ARUs, at least in terms of management, is their inability to provide a good abundance index for the species of interest, particularly for our mammals and birds. So for instance, our staff might detect a Carolina northern flying squirrel on a recording, so that gives us presence-absence data, which is great. But in order to determine abundance, staff would need to follow up with other methods as well. Despite these limitations, we continue to use ARUs because of their many benefits and usefulness for our conservation and management goals. To me, one of the best things about ARUs is they allow us to be everywhere all at once without added staff time. They multiply our efforts across the landscape. For instance, with frog loggers, I can monitor multiple ponds for gopher frogs every night, all night, the entire breeding season. Whereas if I hired a technician, they'd only be able to visit so many ponds in one night and do one survey per pond. Without ARUs, we wouldn't even have data in some cases. As some of our ponds, at least for amphibians, some of our ponds for ornate chorus frogs and gopher frogs are actually located in impact areas of DoD lands, which for obvious reasons I can't monitor regularly with regular surveys. But with the help of our DoD partners setting ARUs at these sites, we're able to continue to monitor these populations and actually compare the breeding activity with other populations across the state. In the case of turkey and quail, ARUs actually allow our staff to monitor these species on not just public lands, but private lands with little, if any, inconvenience to the landowners. ARUs allow us to monitor species like the Carolina northern flying squirrel and the northern saw-whet owl that occur in often very remote, sometimes unsafe habitat, mountainous terrains that would be very difficult to access for regular surveys, particularly at night. Ultrasonic detection. As I mentioned earlier, these devices are actually recording sounds beyond human hearing, which is extremely valuable for species like our threatened and endangered SGC and bat species, as well as the federally endangered Carolina northern flying squirrel. And lastly, ARUs have become a really great way for us to involve volunteers, particularly with our bat monitoring efforts. It's always really good to get the public not just interested, but involved with our conservation efforts through volunteering. Plus, those volunteer hours provide match for grant and funding purposes. Okay, so in these next slides, you're going to see an example of how each of our programs, each of our wildlife management programs have been using ARUs over the years. We'll start with operations. For the past several years, staff have been using ARUs to identify which habitats quail are using on CURE properties. CURE standing for Cooperative Upland Habitat Restoration and Enhancement. And we've been able to use that data to target to provide targeted guidance to private landowners, particularly looking for how to manage for quail on their properties, as well as ensure the best use of our grant monies for habitat management on care properties as well. The Game Fur Bearer program used ARUs to study turkey gobbling chronology, or when turkeys are gobbling, to ensure that our hunting seasons are set correctly. This project used 51 ARUs on 60 properties over that cover the entire state over the course of 4 years and involved over 30 WRC staff. That amount of effort likely would have cost over $6 million using traditional surveys of in-the-field surveys, but instead cost less than $254,000, and which was a major cost savings for the state, as well as providing staff with an unprecedented understanding of turkey gobbling chronology throughout the entire state. And lastly, the Wildlife Diversity Program's bat monitoring efforts using ARUs for NA Bat, which is a nationwide bat monitoring project. For this project, surveys are done using, for species like this big brown bat that you just heard, using stationary and mobile ARUs. Volunteers often get involved with this project because they can easily and often eagerly run these mobile ARU stations. And then data can use the resulting data to guide additional survey efforts, particularly the targeted misnetting efforts for rare species that have been detected during those NA bat surveys. And here I wanted to give you another view of a different big brown bat call. As you might have been able to hear in that recording, and as I mentioned before, these devices are recording all sounds. So just because I'm looking for gopher frogs does not mean that I don't also have recordings of other species, forest frogs, leopard frogs, toads. We are gathering community-level data with each of these projects, which means that the opportunities for future studies and the potential management and conservation benefits could be endless. Especially as software and hardware technologies improve, it's going to provide us additional uses for our previously collected data. And as AI and classifiers also improve, our analysis of our new and old data is only going to get faster. All of this also points to the importance of saving and archiving our acoustic data, because like specimens in a museum, they can be revisited for years to come. So to conclude, WRC biologists are using cutting-edge tools for wildlife management. ARUs can provide important data needed to make informed management decisions. ARUs improve WRC biologists' efficiency and effectiveness. ARUs are a useful tool in the toolbox, but they're not the only one that biologists need. And the data collected for one project can be useful for future projects. And finally, I wanted to end with acknowledging that there are many, many WRC staff that have been involved with ARUs over the years. Way too many to put on just one slide. But the people you see here are the Wildlife Management Division staff that have been running these projects that you just heard about today. Thank you so much for your time and for bearing with me at the beginning there. Who has questions?
Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Bobby?
Excuse me, do you ever match ARUs with cameras?
Have we matched them with cameras?
I mean, just curious about like turkeys or whatever.
I know that we, with the turkeys especially, they did a lot of work trying to basically comparing the methodologies, but I don't know if we've ever paired them with camera methods.
A little bit of northern flying squirrel, we're early on pairing those to see what sort of occupants we got from each method.
I'd be curious to know what they're doing when
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, you don't necessarily get the picture of the animal in it that's making the sound, but yeah.
So the question. Henry's trying to help me field some of the questions since I am still only 6 months in.
Go ahead, Tom.
So Aubrey, tell me how you're using this. Well, give me some highlights of how it's been beneficial to us.
Well, for turkey especially, I know that it really helps set, adjust our hunting regulations and hunting seasons to really be at the peak of turkey gobbling season, and to really dial that in. It was a major effort, and I know it really changed our understanding of turkey gobbling biology. For quail, that's been a long-running effort as well, and has allowed us to help determine which habitats to really improve some of our habitat management for that species, especially on private lands, because private landowners have a lot of interest in quail.
Any more questions?
I have one.
Okay, Gavin.
The Kirk fan here, I think you have a dream job. Nice work and welcome, and it's a great presentation. I have a little bit of question about using this for CASP surveys. It's, the Wildlife Commission does calling amphibian survey routes where you go out in mostly the winter and spring, and you drive a preset route, and you stop every so often and listen for a certain amount of time, and you have to be able to identify where I am, maybe a dozen species, but there might be a couple dozen across the state. So I was thinking about the Merlin app, and it can pull out individual bird song and calls, but it would be, do you see, this is sort of an ARU kind of tangential question, do you see a frog app coming along where we can really separate out species? It's tricky.
Really want to say yes, because honestly, before I came here, I was working with Cornell for an individual project species and had some, but they got really gung-ho about it and decided, they're like, oh, we're gonna take this, Cornell is who created Merlin. I'm like, okay, if I can get Cornell on board, we could create a Merlin app for frogs. But they, and at last I knew they were really interested in doing it for, they said, most species of North America. It's been kind of radio silent since I got here, so I need to try to reach back out to them. I'm really hoping that they actually did take it and run with it. Because I get that question all the time. Why don't they have a Merlin app for frogs? I'm like, I don't know, I would use one too.
The choruses can be mind-blowing, trying to separate out species.
And that's really why a classifier won't work. When you do have a single individual calling, you'd think that, they should still, the technology's there. We're really close.
Great, thank you.
And I hope that for something like CASP, it would be there too.
Good
Any
deal,
further
thank you.
questions? Here none, thank you. It was a great presentation, very informative, and hope you have more units working in the field more often. Breaking down some. We'll move forward now. We're going to get the meat of our agenda, and we'll move through it as efficiently as possible. Reminding how we normally handle this is after we hear the staff presentation and their recommendations, I'll ask for a motion in a second for what we need to approve and move forward as quickly as we can. So with that being said, I will at this time recognize Brian Daniels to present a reciprocal hunting license fees for non-residents.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I have one voting exhibit for updates to reciprocal license fees for Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. Staff recommended approval for the resolution to set new reciprocal license fees as presented in the committee of the whole yesterday.
And this includes the Bud Amendment, South Carolina.
Yes, sir.
At this time, I entertain a motion and a second for adoption approval of Exhibit C.
So moved. Second.
Motion from who seconded? Jim Ruff. Bud and Ruff. Any further comments or questions? Discussion, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This time I'll recognize Chief Deputy Briggs to present our consideration and nomination of non-game wildlife and advisory committee appointments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As heard in the NG's committee yesterday, on behalf of Executive Director Ingram, I recommend reappointments for Ed Corey, Jerry Gray, Lane Sauls, Dustin Smith, and Bruce Wright for the Non-Game Wildlife Advisory Committee, as seen in Exhibit B.
At this time, I'll open the floor for a motion and a second for approval and adoption of Exhibit D. Who made that? David Hoyle, who's the second?
Second.
Kelly Davis. Any further discussion, deliberations? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption of Exhibit D, the appointments of non-game advisory committee, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This time I'll recognize, Ben Solomon, our Assistant Chief of Land and Acquisition, Manager for Land and Water Access Division Matters. Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Our first exhibit will be Exhibit D. This is the Rash Ayers Tract in Ashe County. This is a 24-acre property in addition to three Top Mountain game land. Staff and the Land Acquisition and Property Committee recommend approval of Exhibit D.
You've heard the recommendation. At this time, the floor is open for a motion and second. Approval of adoption of Exhibit E. It's presented.
So moved.
Brad, stand back with the motion. Second by Tom Berry. Any further comments, questions, deliberation? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption of Exhibit E, acquisition of this tract, signify by saying aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carries. Okay, Ben?
We'll move forward to our two other property matters. The first is Exhibit F1. This is the Dominion Energy easement request on R. Wayne Bailey, Castle Game Land. Staff and the Land Acquisition and Property Committee recommend approval of Exhibit F1.
At this time, the floor is open for a motion and acceptance for approval and adoption of Exhibit F1. It's easement as presented.
Motion.
Got a motion from
Second.
Clifton. Got a second from who? Barry. Any further discussion, deliberations? If not, all those in favor of the adoption and approval of this easement as presented, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Easement is approved. Now you've got the next one.
Our final land matter for today is Exhibit F2. This is the TED Renewable Energy easement request. This is a utility easement request at Bertie County Game Land in Bertie County. Staff and the Land Acquisition and Property Committee do not recommend approval of Exhibit F2, excuse me.
At this time, the floor is open for a motion and acceptance and second to deny this easement request.
So moved.
Second. Got a motion second from Barry and Ruffin. Any further comments, deliberations, questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion to deny this easement request, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Dan, you have anything else?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. This time I recognize Dr. Sarah Schweischer, present a species conservation plan for sea turtles conservation plan.
Thank you very much. Exhibit G is a sea turtles conservation plan, which was reviewed yesterday in the Hinges Committee. It had been through public comment review and received 91% approval by the public, and we voted it for approval within the Hinges Committee. So today I'm presenting it to you all. Do you have any questions?
Any questions about the conservation plan? As presented, the Sea Turtles Conservation Plan, we went over in depth yesterday. Hearing none, the floor is open for a motion and second for adoption and approval of the Sea Turtles Conservation Plan, Exhibit G.
So moved.
Got a motion from Whittaker Seegers and second from Bud. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption of the Sea Turtles Conservation Plan, Exhibit G, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Sea Turtles Plan is adopted. Thank you. Sarah, do you have anything else, Dr. Swain?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move forward now. I recognize Melva Bonner, present temporary rulemaking notice of text and rulemaking adoption, a couple items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. The first rulemaking item on the agenda today is to notice the proposed temporary and permanent rule amendments to 10D0252 Needmore Game Land and make it in Swain Counties, exhibits H1 and H2. At this time, staff requests approval to notice the proposed temporary and permanent rule amendments for 10D0252 Needmore Game Land to open a 60-day public comment period and to hold one public hearing as presented at yesterday's committee of the whole.
At this time, the floor is open for a motion and a second to approve exhibits H1 and H2, these two rulemaking proposals. Notice of text. All those in favor? Yeah, well, we've got a motion first. Got a motion from Davis, second from Barry. Any comments or questions? Hear none, all those in favor of adopting exhibit H1 and H2 as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adopted. Okay. Now,
The second and final rulemaking item on the agenda today is for the temporary adoption of the land and water access rules for the 2024-2025 year season. Exhibits I-1 and I-2, which includes 10D-0209, 10D-0243, 10D-0276. At this time, staff recommends the adoption of the temporary amendments to 10D land and water access rules for the 2024-2025 year season as presented at yesterday's committee of the whole.
the floor is now open for a motion and a second on the adoption and approval of exhibits I1 and I2 as just presented.
So moved.
Hall, move, got a second? Second, Alfred. Any further discussion? Hear none, all those in favor of adoption of these approval of exhibits I1 and I2, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mel. Make sure I'm on the right page. And the next thing, we're Darren Barnes, our land and water access to the division chief. 25-26 annual cycle rule and access rules, water access rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today, I will be bringing forth Exhibit J1 and J2. J1 is our proposed amendments to the land and water access rules for the 2025-2026 annual cycle. These were the 6 proposals we discussed yesterday in the committee of the whole. And J2 is the fiscal note for those rules. At this time, staff recommends approval of these J1 and J2 to send these rules to public notice, comment, and presentation at public hearing.
At this time, the floor is open for a motion second for adoption approval of J1 and J2 as presented. Got Brad Standback and Ray Clifton. Motion and second. Any further comment or questions? Hear none, all those in favor of the adoption of J1 and J2 as presented, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Darren. Now, call on Brad Howard, Wildlife Management Division Chief. 25-26 annual cycle wildlife management rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm presenting exhibits K1 and K2. Exhibit K1 as amended yesterday in the COWS meeting. And exhibit K2 is the approved fiscal note. Exhibit K1 is recommendation from wildlife management rules, recommendations by staff to take these rules, post these rules for public notice, comment, and presentation at the public hearing. Staff recommends approval of exhibits K1 and K2.
Floor is now open for motion for adoption. K1 and K2 is presented by Brad. Management rules. Clifton, motion. Second. Second from Dave Holt. Any further discussion, considerations? Dave? Hear none. All those in favor of adoption of K1 and 2 as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Christian Waters, our inland fisheries division chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. The first item I have for you today is Exhibit L1. As it was presented yesterday in the committee of the whole, is the request to notice for text 11 proposed changes for public comment and presentation at public hearings for the 25-26 regulation cycle. I do want to note that relative to L1, it is, first of all, the proposal to change the age of youth has been included, but also it is formatted a little bit different. I'll scroll down. It's formatted just a little bit different than what y'all have previously seen, because this rule had changes that don't become effective until August 1st. The technical way that we have to notice it is it shows the changes that y'all approved for last year, and then it'll show the new changes for this year are in italics. So just be aware that it does look a little different. Exhibit L2 is the approved fiscal note, and staff recommends approval for exhibits L1 and L2.
Are there any questions for Christian about what he just noted, that change from what we'd previously seen? Hearing none, then I'll open the floor for a motion second for approval and adoption of L1 and L2.
So moved.
Tom Berry, motion, a second, Mike Alford. Any further questions, deliberations? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to adopt L1 and L2 as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Christian, please continue.
Okay, the second item I have for you is relative to the adoption of a temporary rule for mullet for its decreasing its creel limit. Exhibit M1, as presented yesterday in the committee of the whole, summarizes the public comments received. Exhibit M2 contains the proposed text. Staff recommends adoption of temporary amendment for the striped mullet and white mullet as presented in Exhibit M2.
Any questions, Christian, about this? If not, the floor is open for motion and second for the adoption and approval of Exhibit M2. So moved. Dave Hoyle, motion, second. Second. Wes Segers. Any comments, deliberation? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to adopt, approve Exhibit M2 is presented for these, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Christian?
Okay, the next item is in Exhibit N. This is for the adoption of temporary rules for mandatory harvest reporting. Exhibit N1, as presented yesterday, summarizes the public comments received, and N2 contains the proposed rule text. Staff recommends adoption of the temporary rule for mandatory harvest reporting as presented in Exhibit N-2.
Okay, before I call for a vote, I know we've had a lot of deliberation and heartburn and questions about efficiency and proficiency, or however you want to talk about this proposal, lots of questions that surround it. But before I ask for a vote, I do want to read sections of the law. This is section 6D. This is a direct quote out of the statute. It was passed by the General Assembly, and it reads, "The Marine Fisheries Commission and the Wildlife Resources Commission shall adopt temporary rules to implement this section and shall adopt permanent rules to replace the temporary rules. Temporary rules adopted in accordance with this section shall remain in effect until permanent rules that replace the temporary rules become effective." And that's, codified in this law, and it gives us a directive, regardless of the heartburn that we have. Lots of questions about it. Additionally, one thing that was not clear to me yesterday that I wanted to go over briefly that's also in this law is the enforcement, and it's right now it's slated to become effective December 1st, 2024. But there will be violation of it be punishable by a verbal warning. By December 1st, 2025, it will be enforced or punishable by issuance of a warning ticket. And December 1st, 2026 is when they'll be able to actually write citations. So it's quite a while before folks will start being written citations, almost 2 years. And I know we have heartburn, we've discussed it, but at the same time, I know that there's talk about delaying this and possibly, other actions. But I wanted to go over the statute, clearly what we've been directed to do by the legislature, and, also to understand with not having the enforcement immediately starting December 1st, which I don't know if that's good or bad, if that dilutes the purpose even further. But then, we have plenty of time to debate all this. With that being said, I wanted to go over that. Are there any questions about what I just read and brought to the attention of the commission before I open the floor for a motion and a second on this matter? Hearing none, the floor is open for a motion and a second on Exhibit N2.
So moved.
Got to approve?
Yes.
So got a motion to, we're good, got a motion to adopt and approve N2. Is there a
I'll
second? Got a second from John Stone. Are there any further discussions or deliberations?
I just want to say that after sleeping on it, I've kind of come around, and this is not a bad idea. I mean, we need more data to be making these decisions.
I agree.
Any further questions or comments, Tom?
Yeah, I just say, I think most people are honest people and that they will adhere to this. And we'll see because of all the negativity of DMF, but let's hope that's the case.
Okay. Further comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote on the adoption of approval of N2. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. This time, Christian, if you'll move forward with the next one, flounder rule.
Yes, sir. The last item I have for you today is for flounder. This was Exhibit O. And it was presented yesterday in the committee of the whole. It is a request to simply notice temporary rule text that will close the harvest season for flounder in 2024. Staff recommends approval for Exhibit O.
Here again, more controversy on this one than heartburn. But just to remind the commission, this is just simply to meet our obligation for rulemaking, to take it out of the notice of text, take public comment, and we'll have an opportunity for a final vote on it in the July meeting. Questions or any other comments about that before I open the floor for a motion? Hearing none, I'll open the floor now for a motion on Exhibit O. Adoption, so moved. David Hoyle.
And the motion is for approval, correct?
This,
To take it to public hearing.
take,
Take it to
that's
public
to approve this notice of text. That's want to be clear that what would the action today is to take the notice of text, take public hearing, we'll take public comments. We'll get those public comments prior to the July meeting, and when you can count, this will come back before the commission, before you make a final decision. So we had a second on the approval of this by Brad Stanback. So we got a motion and a second on the floor to take this to public text. Is there any further comments or deliberations? Hearing none, all those in favor and adoption and approval of Exhibit O, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Well, we got through that pretty good. We didn't break out in any other surprises. For sure. Don't have any other comments. I think this commission, the way our format sets it up, we deliberate, we take our staff recommendation, the information that we have, we process that with what you hear from your constituents. And I think this is, as far as a government agency, we're responsive to public comments. Yesterday was a great example of that, of our personal experiences, our times in the field. And it was a good day yesterday with our commission and hashing this out. Made it a little easier to swallow today. But I do appreciate all you taking time to, really evaluate what our responsibilities are and what our directives are, even when we don't agree with them completely. It's the way our system works, and we'll work through this and see where it ends up. So, but I do appreciate everyone's professionalism and discussions yesterday, and also to remember Cam and Renee.
Mr. Chairman, I would add one thing. Some commissioners are very diligent about going to public hearings. This would be a very fun and informative time for you to go. There will be a lively debate, and we will hear a lot of interesting things. So I would highly recommend you have an opportunity to go to one or more, would be what you signed up for.
I agree. Also with Cam being out with Renee, we wish them well, and obviously we give them the time that they need, to make sure that she gets here on the time and effort and attention she needs. And Cam, I want to thank Kyle and our entire staff for taking up the slack and making sure things continue to work and nothing falls between the cracks. I know Cam's not here, but we talk to him frequently. We communicate with him frequently. He is involved, and he's still an integral part. But Cam, our staff, and Kyle and our staff have done a really good job continuing and going. And if I need any help from any of you all, we'll certainly give you a call. But thank you for all that you do. and particularly for yesterday and the way things have ended up in that. Are there any other comments or questions? Hearing none, meeting adjourned.